I don't know. We usually do music at this time too. So, anyways, welcome everyone to Late Night Restaurant Show podcast, whatever you want to call it. We have a great guest on the show today. I know this is going to be crazy, amazing because I already got the feeling of what this is and what we do definitely need in Canada and also across the United States. We're going to get into this topic around bookkeeping, and I think it's important for us to look at this because it's an area that a lot of us never got trained on. Like I always say, did we go to school to learn about business or did we go to school to learn about marketing, social media, bookkeeping? Probably not. It was one of those things that said, hey, let's open a restaurant. We got into it. And then all of a sudden someone said, hey, we got to figure out the books. And oh boy. So I think when we look at this company that is incredible from what I'm already learning about, coming into Canada or in the United States, I think will be huge support for you. So we have the founder on the show tonight, and I'm super excited to sit with him, chat a little bit about this, and to learn a little bit about this company called FIXE. So sit back, and you know what, Dom, and Beck, you guys are traveling, and I know you guys are rock stars and stuff like this. I show up when we have amazing guests like this. Anyways, gentlemen, they're not going to be able to make the show tonight, but you know what? All the best, guys. Keep traveling out there. We love it. Come back. I think you're back next week for some shows, and all the best. But hold tight, everyone. We'll be right back after this crazy quick intro. Here we go. Just wait a second. Hey, Ryan. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button.
All good, all good. Thanks for having me on, Jay. Really appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you joining us. And you know what? This is such a great topic because I coach a lot of restaurants today, and this is an area. First of all, it's very sensitive. Do you find it very sensitive with restaurants? It's got to be.
I mean, people get scared a little bit when they're like, "Oh, you're going to get access to all of my numbers, and you're going to get access to my bank account." But ultimately, like, people have to be honest with themselves about how they're doing, and it's, I call it a necessary evil, so to speak, right? Like, you kind of need bookkeeping, whether you like it or not, in order to have a successful business.
It's got to be an area that you must have. I'm not saying that you have to disclose people, but it's got to be a lot of stories, though, that you're unraveling from what you find.
Yes, all from the very, very good of restaurants that just have crushed it, and to restaurants that, are robbing Peter to pay Paul in order to keep the lights open, so to speak. So it's people kind of hustling and trying to figure out what they can do in order to keep those stoves turned on. But it's part of this business. It's not a guarantee, but people dive into it because they have a passion for it, just like I did and do. And you get to see behind the scenes a little bit with all of these restaurants.
Is it something that is hard for someone to work with a company like FIXE? Is it hard? Because a lot of people probably have that first question. Like, I've already got a bookkeeper. Why would I want something like this? How's that transition? Is it hard, or is it people very open to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our value plays is like we're restaurant people to start. We're not bookkeepers to start. Like you said, like I didn't go to college for bookkeeping. I didn't go to, I always wanted to go into restaurants, and I still do own restaurants. But people trust us because we kind of understand this industry really, really well. We understand all of the technology with the POS systems and the third-party apps and all these different integrations. And so I think nowadays, especially with COVID, with people being used to being remote and people being able to do work from their computers and connecting to the bank accounts and all that, people are way more open to it today than the old school way where someone would walk into your restaurant and grab a stack of invoices and pay some bills. That's kind of a thing of the past. So I think.
Oh, really? Okay, just wait a second, because I remember those days.
Yeah.
I love that. I always say is that you really don't know how to run a restaurant until your invoices change color.
That's funny. I like that. I remember I'd be running to like FedEx every week to like drop my invoices off. And, I was like, this is crazy that I have to do this.
Do you remember, like, they used to change color because we were so bad? Like, I always say to this, and I say this to all the events I do and stuff, is my claim to fame is I ran a restaurant into the ground. and 20 some years ago, but I only learned from that mistake and all the different things that we've done. But it was the invoices changing color. They go from like pink to green, and then you get red, and then
Yeah.
red would come into like a meeting invite phone call, and then you get a person knocking on your door. It
Yep.
usually came in that sequence, but it was interesting because those were the days. Now
Mhm.
those days are gone now.
Those days are gone. Hopefully. Yeah, those days are gone for sure. It's especially with technology, it's just this, as long as you could snap a photo on your phone, the rest is kind of taken care of.
Now, what do you mean by that? Now, take everything's digital in a sense. So does it take the picture on your phone and upload into your system?
Yeah. So there's a technology called OCR,
Okay.
which is basically the same technology when you deposit a check at your bank account by
Oh,
taking
okay.
a photo of your phone. There are softwares, including the ones that we use, where you just take a photo of the invoice and it captures all that data. And then we kind of handle all of the data and manage it into the accounting system. So that way you could pay your vendors and then you could get timely kind of financial reporting.
That is crazy. So simple. Those days are gone then.
Those days are gone. Yeah,
The-
yeah, yeah, yeah. People always ask, like, how quick do I get reports or how
yeah,
accurate are they? Like, they're as accurate as you guys are at taking photos on your phone. As long as you guys do that, I can take care of the rest.
that is crazy. So when you talk about reports, what's some of the reports that come out? Are they always the same, or tell me more about that?
So we do all of our bookkeeping in QuickBooks Online. That's kind of the basis of what we do. And then our own app or our own dashboard kind of enhances QuickBooks Online to like a restaurant specific system, right? So you get a lot of operators. If I gave everybody access to QuickBooks, half the people would be like, I don't know what the hell I'm looking
I was
at,
gonna
right?
say, yeah, like no one does, right?
Yeah. So what we've done is we've kind of taken all of that data and we've reformatted it so that way it's more presentable to operators like you and I and most people out
Yeah.
there. And so you get your P&Ls, you can get your balance sheets, and then you could also get like metrics as well that we start kind of populating trending charts and kind of best items that have gone up in price and down in price. Because we have everybody in QuickBooks, we could start to aggregate a lot of data and provide
Mm.
valuable information to our clients.
Now, that's the whole thing is no one taught us about QuickBooks, and I'm assuming most people use 20% of QuickBooks, and that's about it. If they
Oh,
can
like
figure it out.
even if that, it's probably like
If that
5%. Yeah, yeah,
that's probably like
yeah,
5%, right?
yeah.
So when you look at that, so do all the reports, do they come out like are they accessible every day? Are they accessible? And I also want to ask you about P&Ls because
Mhm.
I've always heard this whole thing about, and this goes back to Jim and Joe over at restaurantowner.com, is back in the day when they were teaching us 20 some years ago about P&Ls. There's always a difference between regular P&Ls for other businesses, and then there's our restaurant P&L. Is
Mhm.
that still true today?
Oh, I think so. I mean, look, a restaurant P&L, we have a very standard, we have a very set but standard chart of accounts. It's very specific to restaurants, right? And
Mm-hmm.
restaurants, honestly, if you're an operator that has any sophistication, you should be looking at your P&Ls in an accrual basis, meaning like, don't just manage your business by how much cash is in your bank account. You should be managing your business by, when the sales come in and the invoices are dated, so on and so forth. And so ultimately the reporting, which is nice, is that yes, we could send you like a PDF and a report, but our new
Mm-hmm.
dashboard is all live information. So if we give you access to, let's just say, last month's financials, and you're like, oh, wait, I forgot to upload this invoice, just snap a photo. And then the next time you log in, everything's kind of updated already, right? So it's all live information. And you can log into it daily. The only thing I say is, before you look at the current month's P&L, let's make sure that, we have some work to do at the end of the month to make sure it's all good, but you can see where you're trending, so to speak. You can see where your sales are, you can see your cost of goods sold, but maybe some of those monthly expenses aren't in there until the end of the month, so to speak.
So Ryan, I always say this to all their guests, and I apologize on this. First of all, this is what us Canadians do. We apologize all the time and say sorry. But the other thing I want to mention on this, and maybe you have this, but some of the restaurants that I noticed when they have a P&L or they look at their P&L, and there's some areas for improvement. Do you offer support in those improvement areas where all of a sudden it's like ding, 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 your labor's went out of crazy or your food cost is out of whack? Do you, or your operational cost or whatever the case is, those go out of whack? Is there any like, sirens go off, bells go off, and then a solution base of resources comes in and says, this is what you need to do to fix things?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we are our latest our dashboard keeps on adding more features, and some of those features that is coming out is like some basic analysis on your P&L, right?
Cool.
Your food
That's huge.
costs like trending in the wrong way, labor, this particular vendor is charging you more than in the past. To now, though, what I will say is our account managers are really good at like identifying when something looks a little wonky.
Wow. Really?
So they'll say like, hey, like we think you set this up wrong in your POS system, right? Or we see a bunch of uncategorized whatever things in your POS. You should fix this so that way your financials are a little more accurate. We will give that advice. But I do want to be clear. We are not your CFO, right? We are not that person, but we do have a lot of experience.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And we can provide some like very helpful tips going forward.
That's really good, because I think a lot of people look at that and go, well, what do I do? Right.
Yeah.
Or just live with it as that margin gets lower and lower at the end of the P&L. It's like, like, what do I do now? Like, I don't know what to do. And a lot of people don't know. Like, I always say this, and we were mentioning this in the pre-show, is just that there's no business school to help people navigate through situations when they do go into a tailspin, or, like what happens when you start to see your costs go through the roof, or your food costs or labor costs or all these other costs go through the roof. What do you do? No one taught us that. Right. And then what it is usually scrambling or pulling levers without, rhyme or reason. And they get into a pickle. And we know as soon as you get that tailspin going, it's hard sometimes to get out of it. Right.
Yeah, and even like I went to Cornell. I went to like the hotel school. I did.
Okay.
I took.
You guys got those down there. You guys got those awesome schools.
That's true. We do have them there. But I did. I took all the classes and everything, and you don't like all. I learned a lot at Cornell, but a lot of the stuff I learned when I was actually in the restaurant, like how to negotiate with your vendors and how to, manage your cash flow so that all of those things. And then it's not like you're learning how to like integrate your POS systems correctly in college. You kind of figure all that out by doing it yourself, and hopefully we can parse some of that knowledge onto our clients.
So Ryan, the one thing that I always, and Josh Capel's a good friend of mine, Josh always talks about the importance of cash flow. From your perspective, because you're right in the mix of it, how important is cash flow nowadays?
Well, I mean, it's obviously super important, right? Because if you run out of cash, then you're up a creek. But here, like, I'll give you an example.
Josh always goes cash flow, Jay. It's cash flow. Nothing else matters.
Well, okay, so like my very close friend just opened up a restaurant very close to me here in Los Angeles, and I went to Cornell with him, and he had me personally like go through his financials, and he's doing really well. Like he has a lot of money in his bank account right now, and I'm like, hey, dude. Let's just hold off a moment because you have some big expenses coming up between sales tax and payroll and stuff that you haven't done. So even though your bank account looks super great today, the stuff is going to be coming out shortly. Let's wait till the dust settles before you decide to pay this vendor a little bit more or make a distribution. And so cash flow is like super important, and it's super important to be honest with yourself about what's coming up. Because the last thing you want to do is not have enough money for payroll or not enough money to pay your landlord because you decided to distribute a little bit more money to yourself this time, or you decided to pay another vendor a little bit quicker than you needed to. And now you're in a pickle, like you said.
Well, there's another thing I always say to restaurants is you really aren't a restaurateur until you pay your staff with your Visa.
That's a new. I've actually heard that before, but yeah, that is an interesting situation.
I've had it happen, dude.
Yeah,
I've had that happen a few times. It was like, oh boy, let's call up the other lady in her Visa too. So there's a couple of things I want to touch on here as well. And you might have seen this, and maybe this is maybe a great question, but what is it? Because I'll tell you what I bought. It was like the worst thing to do. And I don't know if people do this because a lot of people get that cash flow, or like you said, they get money in the bank and then they get kind of crazy. I find sometimes What is the worst thing that a person can buy from your perspective, your experience, that you're like, why did you go and buy that? Why it's you don't need that. What was it?
I definitely have a handful of clients that the owners have their Range Rover or their Porsche on the books, and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's like a restaurant expense, but all good, I guess.
Right, mine was a Hummer.
Yeah.
It's like we bought a Hummer, and it was like, well, you know what? Those $1,500, a monthly, or what was it, biweekly or whatever it
Well,
was.
I have a really good one, and I want to be careful that I don't divulge their name, but I have let's just call it an influencer that owns a restaurant here in LA, and they decided to purchase Teslas for everybody in the restaurant.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And like, it's not like, yeah, I don't want to comment on the profitability of the restaurant, but that might have been a little bit more.
Yeah, I always find that car, right? It goes back to making those smart decisions. And when you're you have that money coming in and everything else, I always find and I teach a lot of this now, is that there's going to be those rainy days that you need that money in the bank. And
Yeah.
a lot of people think you get on that roll and you're busy, and you're crazy and the money's coming in, but it sure can go fast out.
Yeah, it sure can. I mean, even in our city in Los Angeles, with the fires and all the fires that happened in the Palisades, we have a couple clients, they had to close, but we also had a lot of clients that were around the neighborhood, and their restaurants were significantly impacted because people didn't want to go out to dinner for a solid month or two. And that really
I heard about that.
Yeah.
I heard about that. We had a caterer on, Kevin, I think his name was, from down there, and he was a few blocks from the fires. Mm-hmm. And he said the same thing. People just stopped. Like they didn't want to go out, right? Like whatever the case is. And I don't blame them. Like it was sad because we had a devastating fire up here last year in one of our provincial park or national parks. Jasper got wiped out with a fire, and it was incredible. So it was very, very small compared to what happened down there in California. But you're right. Like no one wants to go to Jasper now. No one wants to go out, right? Like why go out there now, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah, restaurants that were just crushing it, all of a sudden, 2 months, you're just have got nothing, and then you got to make sure you have the cash flow to support that.
So when you look at programs like FIXE and stuff like this is the biggest thing, because every program that comes out has all these amazing features and bells and whistles. But what's the support like?
Yeah, we built. It's funny. So it's funny when I've talked with investors and peers. They're always like, "Hey, like, where's the technology? Where's the technology?" And our technology is gotten there. But in the beginning, it was like we started with all service, right? And we wanted to prove that we had something that people wanted. And now we're layering more and more technology on top of it. So we bootstrapped everything together, and anything that wasn't quite as automated, we had kind of people behind the scenes that were helping with that. But everybody gets like a dedicated account manager in this time zone that you don't call 1-800-FIXE. You have the direct line of your account manager. So, and they are there for everything that's not automated. We'd like to say maybe 85% of the bookkeeping is, and the last 15 to 20 still requires human oversight before you actually see your financials. And that's where your account manager comes in, reviews it. This looks a little wonky. Something got disconnected. Hey, I need to pay this vendor right away. You call the account manager or email them, and they take care of it right then and there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's good that you led with that, because most people forget about the service. They run out with the tech and everything else, and then they go, "Oh yeah, the service," and then it just isn't there to support. And restaurateurs are going to be calling that number nonstop, or calling their support.
Yes, 100%. I mean, obviously, with all these POS systems, and there's some pretty big ones that have grown a lot in the past few years.
Yeah.
I don't know if their support has kept up with that same pace.
But it is some of the things. And I always say to those companies out there, like the POS ones, it's like when we interview them, or we have a meeting with them, with some of the clients that we work with, is I always say, so what's your service like at 5 o'clock on a Friday? Or 6 o'clock on a Friday night?
Yeah.
Dinner rush, because that's when that sucker is going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
right? It's always that. And then they're, well, yeah, I know we have someone, and yeah, but that's great that you have a direct line. That's awesome. So let's talk about the onboarding. How fast is it? Because you've got a great, I love how you have placed on your website the two differences between like having a person and working with fixed is that I love that. That's great. Everyone should do that. I love that. So onboarding,
So
how long?
onboarding, I like to say, like, we'll move as quickly as you give us access to what we need access to. The beauty of what we created is that we've done everything on QuickBooks Online, and we use our own software plus a couple of third-party softwares that we provide on behalf of the client that we call the best-in-class tech stack as part of our service, right? QuickBooks Online, we include Margin Edge as one of our softwares as well. And one
Okay.
of the reasons we chose these is because the integrations work very quickly and they're very easy to set up, right? And so we can get someone up and running really within about 5 business days. And then you're going to be in onboarding for at least the first month, just so we can give you your first set of reports. And we are all on the same page on the way that's formatted and everyone understands that. So everything gets connected and everything is all of that information starts coming in within the first week. And then we want to make sure you have some extra TLC in the beginning so that way your first set of reports are up to par, paying the vendors is on the cadence that you want, and then eventually you get past to your account manager and then they're taking it from then on out. You don't need to say, there's other companies that keep you in onboarding for 3 to 6 months, and it's like, now, like, we can do it pretty
Wow.
quickly. All this stuff works pretty seamlessly, especially with the technology nowadays.
Does it improve their AR in a sense, or with some of these distributors and companies like this, because you guys are more on top of it, or do you see an improvement?
When you say AR, like the money that's coming into the restaurant, or the money that, or do you mean AP
Going
that
out,
pay
yeah,
vendors?
paying the vendors.
So I think that I mean the AP is only as good as how much money you have in the bank, right? But
True.
I think we could provide a lot more. Look, it's when I opened my first restaurant, I literally had like a checkbook in my back pocket, and I was like scrambling to write checks all the time. And so you don't have to do that anymore, right?
You
Like,
have to do that? Oh shit, Ryan.
yeah,
I
yeah. So
remember
you
that
don't have to
day.
do that anymore. So I hopefully that saves you time and you have a lot more transparency on what you owe. And maybe if there's a missing invoice from the statement, we do all the reconciliation there. On the AR side, I do want to comment though. So nowadays, um, so many restaurants have a substantial part of their sales coming from DoorDash and Uber Eats
Yes.
or Postmates. And so one of the other softwares that we provide is called Loop that does a really good job at third-party reconciliation. And so we were one of the first firms to include this at all because I want to make sure, restaurants will think they sold $1,000 one night, all DoorDash sales, but really it's like $800 or $750 after all the commissions are taken out. And I think it's important that we paint that picture correctly because otherwise they'd be artificially inflated, and a
Yeah.
lot of people kind of forget to do that.
Yeah, well, that's crazy because those numbers are significantly lower than what they're bringing in when it comes to those third party companies, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the cost because this is the big question. Everyone's waiting for this cost until like this, and I love how you break it down here. Is that real? Like, is that number real?
Real numbers. We
That is insane. Are
we
you
we
kidding
we
me?
we do have a fixed price, so it's $655 per location. It includes all of the software that I just described. There's a couple of different levels depending on the volume of your restaurant and how much hand holding you want as a client, which is totally fine. But yeah, it starts at 655 because when I owned my own restaurants, I was paying like 1,500 a month, and I was getting like crappy, support and software. And when I tried to introduce new software to my old bookkeeper, he told me to like go kick rocks, right? So the software allows us to charge less, and because we kind of dictate the tech stack a little bit, it allows us a lot of negotiating power with those softwares to provide a lot of value back to the restaurants. And so that was how we kind of formed this.
Well, first of all, it's huge. Now, some locations, like even the ones I coach with, we have an in-person accountant or
Mhm.
bookkeeper in person. Is this still, would this replace those people? Because that's even huge, more savings.
It would, but I will say we do have a lot of groups. When I think I recently posted a blog. Like, I think if you're doing over $10 million a year as a group, let's
Yeah.
say, you
Yeah.
should probably get like a controller or some type of
Oh, okay.
administrator. And so what we'll do is we'll replace all the bookkeeping functionality, and then we'll work with the controller, who's kind of like the gatekeeper between the bookkeeping and then the owners of the restaurant. So we could replace all the bookkeeping all in all, but as you get to a certain level, you should have a little bit of a layer of oversight
Yeah.
internally when you can afford it. And then we work hand in hand with them.
Okay, perfect. Well, because I know this would be, first of all, this is a crazy savings for a lot of people, and people are looking for those areas to trim the cost. And it's the reality of the industry. We're looking for
Mm-hmm.
every which way and where we need to improve on.
Mm-hmm.
And I always look at this, and this is what I like about companies like FIXE, is that you're coming in, and maybe this isn't the right terminology, but it feels like you're disrupting this space. Feels like you're coming in and disrupting it in a sense for the good. Like it's a really good thing to be able to come in here, change this up, say, hey, we got a different option. Here's a different opportunity than what people have been saying that they've had to do. Is this something new? This is something new. This is crazy.
It's look, I mean, in Los Angeles, there's a lot of there's I don't want to say a lot, but in some of the bigger cities, there's obviously maybe
Oh,
some
there's a lot.
restaurant specific, yeah, there's some restaurant specific firms, but they charge a lot of money, maybe because they always have, or maybe because they are actually doing a lot of things by hand when technology could help with that. And so for me, not only does it disrupt kind of those people here in the bigger cities, but you also have a lot of people across the country that don't have access to something like this, and they own
You're
restaurants
right.
or everywhere. And so we could provide a service to them that they didn't realize that they had access to, restaurant
It's huge.
specific keeping, as opposed to you like trying to do it yourself. That's for the birds.
That has to be for the birds. Well, it just goes back to, no one taught us, right? No one taught us what
Yeah.
to look for, or what to write off, or how to keep the books clean, right?
Mhm.
Now, is there still that old saying that some restaurants, I won't say what kind of restaurants, have two books?
uh, I haven't. I haven't. I don't think we have any clients that
Okay.
fall under that, but I do have some people on my team. I do have some people on my team that have worked with other restaurants where they did, let's just say, do some funny business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we always say is that's also, you don't know you're a restaurateur until you figure the two book deal out. Do you guys use any AI into
Yeah.
this, into your programs?
So we are starting to use AI, like I said, with some of the analytics that we're
Okay.
starting to provide. So it's funny, like AI, everyone puts like AI on every business these days, and it's like a thin layer of chat GPT over
Okay.
whatever software. So for us though, we were really trying to feed it a lot of our own personal experience of how we would analyze your financials, being that everyone in our kind of management team kind of came from restaurants directly. And so we want chat GPT or whatever, we use as the integration to really be that restaurant advisor to you. Right. And so it's funny. The other day I was just playing around and I put one of our P&Ls into chat GPT and said like, hey, can you analyze this for me? And it was like very plain. It was like your
Yeah.
costs look good and your sales look fine. And there was no like analysis in there. And that's what we're
Yeah.
starting to populate, right? Like,
Yeah.
your credit card processing is 2% higher than what it was the month before, whatever, things like that. So that by the end of the year, you're going to have a lot of analytics that are AI driven from all of the QuickBooks data that we have.
Do you find, I just want to, because I don't want to take all your time today, and I really appreciate it, do you find, what are some of the things that people do when you start working with them? We know to don't go buy fancy cars,
Mhm.
but what are some of the things that you notice that people do wrong with their books? Is it just because they're not, sorry, not lazy, but they're just busy and they don't know how to do them? Do you find that there's one of these things that like, oh yeah, he did that again? What's that one
Um,
thing?
I would say like one of the things I hate is when
That's a
people
better
have,
answer, better way to answer it.
I hate when people have vendors on auto pay.
Oh, okay.
Like I hate that. It's one of my things that when we get into onboarding, we kind of politely say you should eventually take this off. Now, some people do it because they can't get terms from the vendor, and I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
some
yeah.
people do it because they just don't want to write checks. And my argument to them is like, well, if you return that case of tomatoes, how do you know if the vendor is giving you credit for the tomatoes if
Yeah.
they're putting you on auto pay? And so them having too much, I would trust in what the vendors are doing is probably one of those common mistakes.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting to know because I know a lot of them want to move that way because it just makes it a lot more easier from their side. But you're right. How are you getting credit and how those credits are coming through? It would probably be another kind of a swamp to jump into.
Yeah,
More
yeah,
of
for
that.
sure. But and then yeah, I mean that's a big one. And then obviously, I guess one other thing that I would say is, um, you have your POS system. Your POS system, someone described it to me as kind of like your nerve center, your brain center of your whole restaurant.
I've heard a different terminology, but
But what I would say is like sometimes people have like sales coming in from other angles
yeah,
outside of
yeah,
the POS.
yeah,
And for me, it was always a belief all of your sales should come from your POS. Even if you're not processing the credit card in the POS, create a tender, create a house, whatever it is, you have some catering event. Don't try to do it off to the side. Have the
yeah,
POS be that central nervous system for all of your anything sales related, because that will help because we're going to be taking that information to
yeah.
doing books. And if I don't know, or you did something and I have no idea what it's for, it's going to be hard to figure that stuff out.
And you're integrated with like Toast, Square, Lightspeed, all the big guys, right?
All the big guys, yeah.
All the big guys. So that's got to be an easy transfer over for all the information that's stored inside them.
Exactly. Really
And
easy.
ADP too, which is really cool.
Yeah, we do ADP, Gusto, Paychecks, all the big payroll companies. We even built our own integration for Toast
Really?
Payroll as well. So yeah, with all of those guys, and then again, we use Margin Edge for all the invoice processing, and then a few other kind of softwares behind the scenes in order for us to do what we do.
Cool. I was hanging with Margin Edge all day yesterday, so
Oh
it's
yeah.
a good shout out there as well. Excellent. Well, is there? So I always say this, and you don't have to tell us any secret sauce that's coming up here. But what's the future look like for FIXE? You guys are coming in here, disrupting stuff. Do you got any future plans that you can share with us?
Well, look, our mentality is that we want to try to help operators understand their financials like easier and have what I call frictionless delivery of reporting. So
Ooh.
I don't think restaurant people have time to be on their computers or really have time to be opening up emails or even apps these days. So a lot of our reporting and hopefully with our AI insights are actually going to be text enabled. So eventually you're going to be able to text us, hey, like what did I pay for tomatoes last month? And then we could spit that back out
Shut
very
up.
quickly. Yeah. And so that's like what we're building, hopefully by the end of the year. Because I think restaurant people, it's the owners are one thing, but the owners always say, I just want my managers to understand the numbers a little bit better. And
Yeah.
granted, they don't need to see like the entire P&L, but they need to look at the controllable section.
Yeah.
And we want to try to make that as easy to understand as possible. And so that is our whole goal with FIXE, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that controllable, especially for some owners that are owning multi locations, when you look at those controllable areas on your P&L, that really determines the success of your managers. Like, are they running the place right?
Correct. Exactly. If people see like, hey, I got my food cost is 29%, they may think that's good, but then you compare it to the location,
Yeah.
5 miles down the road, it's 26%. Let's identify what's causing those differences.
Well, it's funny you say that. I get excited about this stuff, but most people are just focusing on your labor and your food cost, or just your food cost, and determine the success rate of the restaurant based on those two areas. But we know those controllable or uncontrollable areas there's some big dollars in those numbers.
Yeah.
There's huge numbers in those, right? And if our managers and we got trust in them and they're running all those things, you see those things are going out of whack. You start going, okay, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I had a restaurant owner that I would say is like pretty experienced kind of, he's looking to open up another location. And he asked there, he showed me the rent and he asked me like, do you think this makes sense? Does the rent look good for this location? I looked at him and I was like, Mark, like, don't think about if you can afford the rent. How much sales do you think you can do out of the location? And then let's see what rent you could afford based on the sales that you think you're going to do. And I always say you need to target about 8% as your, rent monthly of your top line sales. And if you start opening up locations that are 10, 11, 12, 13% or higher, it's going to be really hard for you to make some money at those locations. And so I think rent and some of those other like fixed costs that are not controllable are really important when you're scouting locations for sure.
Right. Is that also on the formula of the sales per square foot?
Yeah. So for me, like when I look at locations, even in my own restaurant, like I try to target about $1,000 a square foot per a year, right? So if I get
per year.
So if I get 1,000 square foot restaurant, then I should do $1 million out of it. Now, that might change a little bit depending on like what type of restaurant you are, but I don't want to hear a guy that like is getting 1,000 square foot space and he's like, I'm going to do $5 million out of this thing. I'm like, not even an Apple store does that much, right? Like,
but so many restaurateurs don't know that, Ryan.
Yeah.
Is that they don't know the formulas of what their maximum output is or what their outputs are on their locations. I always say is that I use Starbucks and a lot of the things that I look at. I was like, there's a reason why that Starbucks is that size with that tables, that space. There's a formula and all these things that what you can maximally put out.
Yeah.
Or what you should be to pay the bills.
Exactly. And it's like, I was listening to like a business podcast and like, I think Apple's like the highest you could ever be in terms of, revenue per square foot. Yeah. Then a company like Lululemon, who's also great, is like 2,200 a square foot. And so like you get to some of these restaurants and they start showing me like projections and like, we're going to do this much business. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, let's be a little reasonable of what you're going to do.
But so many don't even know what those numbers are. Like,
yeah,
what's your end goal? I always, when we coach them, we always go to the end part. Okay, what's your maximum you can go to? And they always say what it is. They say, well, now we have to work back. And it's like, when you hit those numbers, like, it's just not going to happen. Those are going to happen. But they don't even know what that is. A lot of them don't even know what the projections are or what they could do. And that's what's unfortunate. No one taught us those things.
Yeah, right? No one taught. When I opened up my first restaurant, I was trying to raise money, and this was back in like 2008. And I showed an investor my projections, and I had projected $1,000 a square foot back then. And he's like, "You're gonna struggle to get to that number," and that was in 2008. Now I think it's with inflation and everything, it's closer to that number, but that taught me a lot, right? Some people think, oh, like I'm going to figure out how many turns I'm going to get and how many seatings I'm going to get. I go really cut and dry. How many square feet do you have? And let's be reasonable how much sales you could do per square foot. And then you use that as the basis. And then you could figure out how much rent you could afford. And then depending on the type of concept you have, what your food cost is probably going to be and your labor costs. And then you could fill everything else in.
It really sets it up. Then you just go backwards on the numbers and stuff and goes, okay, this is what you got to do. You can get down to, it's what you got to do per hour.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can walk yourself right back into it and going, nope, not going to work. It's not going to work. And a lot of people do that, especially with the rents that are coming out nowadays and the leases that are coming out are redonkulous on some of these numbers that are out there right now. And that's going to kill most businesses. I always say that most restaurants don't fail because they have bad food. It's because it's all this other stuff.
You could have the best restaurant and you could have the best food and fail because you spent too much money on your build out, or you have just the rent is not working, whatever it is. And then you could have like not a great restaurant, but because the rent is in like, is a great kind of formula. It's in the perfect ratio. You're going to be super successful.
It is, but it's knowing those numbers and working with companies like yourselves to understand that and to just really get a good hold on their P&Ls and then get a hold on their numbers is so critical. But I think a lot of people get scared of them. They get a little terrified of the numbers. It's uncomfortable. It's an
Mhm.
area that, oh, like it's much easier making food than talking numbers, and they
Yeah.
veer from it. So, but first of all, I just want to thank you for your time. I know I could talk to you all day about this stuff. I don't get to talk a lot about this stuff because I focus a lot on marketing, but this brings me back to when I started coaching restaurants many years ago. Is this stuff, and this stuff is so critical because when you
Mhm.
understand it, you can really, it's so different than understanding and breaking out your menu and breaking out your costs on your menu. As soon as you understand these basic numbers, it really helps on the direction you steer your ship.
Yeah.
In right, like, you know what you need to do, or okay, we don't have enough cash flow coming in, and don't go buy that Hummer, and all these different things that are out there. um it is something that I think with working in companies and being able to have a program like you have now offered out to the industry at ridiculously low price,
Mhm.
which is phenomenal. So I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for creating a program like this for our industry. Especially, we got to bring you to Canada. We're going to bring you to Canada.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
for
We got to
sure.
bring you up here into Canada, and to be able to share it with all the people up here, because this is an area that I think will save a lot of restaurants out there. So I just want to thank you for your time, and all the best on this.
Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate it. I had a blast being on here with you, and we will stay in touch for sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan.